Hi, my name is Dale Brown, and I have the great privilege of being the pastor at Community Church at Ocean Pines. It's a wonderful church with great people. I often say that I would do this and not get paid, but that's not quite true. But I really do enjoy this church. The people are tremendous, and of course, God is always good. And we're doing a podcast, and we're changing the format of our podcast a little bit. We were experimenting, Ted and I, and trying to see how to do this and what appearances and the things that would be a part of it. And I kind of was doing it by myself. But now we're going to shift to, as often as possible, having a guest and having someone who's very interesting to talk to. And we have someone who's fascinating this morning to talk to, a dear friend, and to help you to know about church events, maybe things that are happening within the United Methodist Church, and just public events and faith and how they connect as well. So I hope that you'll tune in and watch, because you're going to get to meet some really, really wonderful, wonderful people. When I arrived as the pastor here, I was made aware that there was a visitation pastor, associate pastor, whom I had known for many, many years, hadn't had contact with for a little bit because we were in different districts and things, but just a really wonderful man whom I have profound respect for and love for. And his name is the Reverend Dr. Robert Harris. Now, we call him Bob, so we're going to call him Bob the rest of the time.
Absolutely.
But I want you to know that he has done a lot of educational work and a lot of training, and is one of our best and most professional clergy that we've ever had in this conference. Bob served 34 years of active ministry, I think, Bob, is what you had said, and another 18 years in a retired status, working first at Asbury and then here at Community Church. And Bob's just a tremendous guy. Bob, it was always a privilege to work with you. You were always so collegial and professional, and I really enjoy having you and Kay as a part of the congregation. We have 4 clergy that are a part of our congregation, and that's a real privilege, and it's scary for me because I have to preach in front of you guys. So it is my privilege to welcome Bob this morning, and we're going to talk about some of Bob's life experiences in ministry and beyond, and Bob is just a great guy, and I hope that you enjoy our time together. So Bob, first of all, welcome. Now, I know where you grew up because I served there as a pastor, but Bob grew up in Bridgeville, so can you tell us a little bit about growing up in Bridgeville and your family and all kinds of stuff?
I grew up on a farm outside of Bridgeville. Bridgeville was a big city, so we grew up in the country. I lived in two country houses throughout my growing up time. The first house, we were there 11 years. I was born in that house. That house did not have electricity. At age 11, we moved a mile away to another farmhouse. That house had electricity, but didn't have indoor plumbing. I didn't know until I was in high school how poor we were growing up. We always had food on the table. We had a farm, and we had chickens and ducks and a horse and cows and all this stuff, and a big garden. Always had plenty to eat. But I didn't realize how poor we were until I got into high school. And I noticed all my friends and buddies lived in houses with indoor plumbing. I was always embarrassed to invite them to come to my house because we didn't have that. I was probably 20 when we got the first bathroom in that house, and by then I was out doing other things. But I remember that, but I always felt loved. I had my mother and father, and I had 2 brothers and a sister, all older. The closest one to me was 10 years older. So I really grew up as an only child. Now they were gone and all this kind of stuff. And I always got teased by them, being the youngest, and got special attention and all that kind of stuff. So that's my background in Bridgeville.
So you were the favored child, like I was, and I was the youngest as well.
That is true.
Now I have to ask you a different question. Now, growing up in Bridgeville is famous for scrapple.
Oh, yes.
Do you like scrapple?
Absolutely.
Now, do you like it thin or thick?
Thick and crisp.
And mustard or what do you like on it?
Nothing.
Nothing. Okay, you're all right, Bob. You're okay. You're okay. When I was in Bridgeville, we were told you had to get 10 slices out of each loaf for the Apple Scrapple Festival.
Ah,
So I've got a lot of, and I participated in the Scrapple throw and the Scrapple carving and all those things.
we made our own.
Yeah, I bet you, did you now, the one thing we tried making our own with that did not work was deer meat. It was too lean, so you needed a little bit of fat in the Scrapple. To
Every
make it.
year we had a huge hog killing.
My family in Stockton did the same type of thing.
We killed 2 or 3 at a time.
Yeah.
And they were hanging on these tripod things, and that was a big day. Everybody came to help.
That's right.
All this kind
Similar
of stuff.
type thing. So,
Yep.
but I will tell you, my experience with Bridgeville, it was just a great place to be. Still remains that kind of community. People helped one another. They loved one another. The thing that amazed me, Bob, about Bridgeville was that when there was a funeral, the whole town turned out. They came to the visitation. They supported one another.
Yep.
Didn't matter what racial background or economic status. It was just a wonderful community of kind people. All right, so I want to know a little bit about your call to ministry. How did you decide? How did you feel called into United Methodist ministry?
Okay, I graduated from high school in 1959. All my buddies were going to college, and I really wanted to go too, but I knew money was not available. I did decide to go to business school 2 years, and I went to Goldie Beacom in Wilmington, and then I finished my second year at Jefferson College, or School of Commerce in Salisbury. I worked for a bank for 3 years. In the midst of all that, I was in the Air Force for a very brief time. But while I was there, my father died. And I was given what's called a hardship discharge because my mother lived alone and I was needed back in that area. So I worked for a bank for 3 years. During that time, I sang in a gospel group. And there were 4 of us, started with 4 guys. And we were on the radio station out of Georgetown, and we sang in all kinds of churches and all this stuff. Then it grew to 8. But during that time, I became real close to my pastor. I can't think of his name just went on my head. Eckert was his last name. And one day, sitting on a piano bench in Cannon Church, my home church, we began to talk, and I told him things I were feeling and what was happening in my life. And I really felt at that time, sitting on the piano bench, that I could not be the kind of Christian God wanted me to be without being a full-time pastor. And I looked about others, how to serve God, this kind of thing. For me, I had to be a pastor. That was my call. It was so clear. And from that point on, I began to work towards that goal.
And where did you go to college? Where did you finish up?
Asbury, in Kentucky.
In Wilmer?
Wilmer, Kentucky. Yeah. I got there because of a young man named Howard Joseph from Seaford, Delaware.
Okay.
And we met a few times. He told me how great the school was. And again, I felt I couldn't go anywhere else. That's where I had to go to school.
It was a very obvious step in God's leading for you. I did doctoral work at Asbury, and it's a great place. It's a wonderful place. Now, you were there then in the early 60s?
Yes.
So what was it like for you at Asbury in the early 60s?
Oh, late 60s.
Late 60s, okay.
I didn't start college until 65.
65 because you've been working during that time.
I had this interim there, and then I graduated from Asbury in 69. It's a great place. I mean, I enjoyed my time there. I look back on all the restrictions that were involved. How you could date a girl but you couldn't hold her hand walking across campus, and
I knew about some of those.
all this kind of stuff. So we had chapel. It was 2 times a week or 3 times a week, mandatory, because they had checkers on the balcony.
You had to sign in,
and they would check if your seat was empty. You know.
Now, were you there? Now they've had a lot of revivals at Asbury. Were you there during that time, or was
I was out there during what they call the Great Revival.
Okay.
I had graduated to go into seminary in Wesley.
Okay. So you went to seminary at Wesley in D.C. And you when were you there, Bob?
I graduated in '72.
Okay.
3 year do my master's degree.
And so then you came back here to this conference. And where are some of the places you've served?
My student appointment was just south of Dover, south and east of Dover, Magnolia, Lipsick, and Little Creek.
Okay.
Schedule was 9, 10, and 11. And I wasn't late either Sunday at either church. That was my, God knows what to do with these student pastorships, because the people there know you're a student pastor. They know how to love you and how to train you to be a pastor.
My son just has finished that type of appointment in Kent County, Maryland. How did you handle the middle church? Because you can arrive early and you can stay late, because I've served a 3-point charge as well. So did you intentionally spend extra time outside of Sunday?
I had to do that because there wasn't time on Sunday morning. There really wasn't.
And then where did you go?
Then I went to Wilmington. Big contrast. I was an associate pastor for 2 years.
At which church?
Hillcrest Belfont on Marsh Road. When I went there, Olin Shockley was the senior pastor.
Okay.
And then after a year, he left to be Dover District Superintendent.
Yeah.
And then Bill Revell came to be senior pastor there. And after 2 years, which were great, again, I learned a lot. But I wanted to be on my own.
My experience is having been an associate with Olin also is that you learn a lot, and it puts you in a good position to bring in what you've learned in seminary, connect it to what you've learned practically, and set you up for a great amount of success down the road. And you worked with a good man. He's friends of both of ours, and Bill Revell was. He's a very fine Christian man. Now, the last I knew, your last appointment prior to retirement was at Bethesda.
Yes.
Where are some of the other places in the in-between time that you served?
Okay, I served Clayton and Kenton, Delaware.
You were in Denton.
Smyrna, that area.
Yeah, I know those churches very well.
I know
and I know your first appointment too very well.
Oh, okay.
Because I was the mentor of the pastor who was serving as a student pastor while I was there. And you served Denton, St. Luke's.
Yes. And remember the big split at the Gethsemane Church?
Yes, I do remember that.
Somehow, I decided I needed to go there and see if that church could survive or not. So I volunteered.
Okay.
I called Bill Revell, who was superintendent at that time, and said, if it's possible, I want to go to Gethsemane Church and see what's going to happen. And he said, I remember his words, "Bob, you're a brave man, but if you're going to do this, we'll go." And it's amazing. When I got there, the congregation had dwindled and all kinds of problems, and we had all these buses. They had this bus ministry, and all that died when 2/3 of the congregation moved out or left.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to say the church survived, and
you did too.
And I did too. And it's still going. So.
It is. And it has a vital ministry today.
Oh, yeah. Very much so.
Because I've kept up with it, because I've had friends that have served there and things. And it's, it's different, but it's still doing work in the name of Jesus Christ. And that's what we all want. Now, Bob, I guess the next question I would ask you is twofold. And we ask this of persons who are coming into ministry. What was your greatest joy in ministry, and what was your greatest challenge?
I guess the greatest joy, which sounds weird, but it's being with people during a crisis situation. Because that's a time when people are so vulnerable, they need God's presence. I remember one particular case, this young couple, 9-year-old son, only child they had, was killed in a tragic car accident. And I worked with them, and it was a blessing to see them grow, I guess, in that process.
Or respond.
The pain was there, but God was still with them and brought them through. So I guess that, I didn't like doing weddings.
Okay.
I really didn't.
Well, now, what about weddings did you not like?
All the extra stuff. Well, when I said extra stuff, everybody was so concerned about the flowers and how the church was going to look, and who was coming, and where they were going to go for the reception, and all that kind of stuff. Some of the best weddings I had, or officiated for, were those that were real small.
I concur.
They're real small.
Yeah, I concur. And you get we talk about all the extemporaneous things, but we don't talk about this very important life covenant that people are entering into, and it's like
Yes.
and all the other stuff is nice. It's not.
Oh, yeah,
bad.
it is.
It's beautiful, and
Right.
But yeah, I also like doing the outdoor weddings.
Yes.
Like at the beach and things, because it's just you do it, they're there. Did you make a practice of going to the wedding reception, or did you just kind of cut out of those?
If they were people I knew, part of their congregation had a connection, yes.
Mm-hmm.
If they were strangers just coming in to use the building, then no.
I have a policy that what I try to do with weddings is I try to selectively choose those families that I think may become a part of the life of the church and things, because one of the struggles that clergy has is that we're on call. And sometimes the boundaries get skewed very easily, and if you don't choose to set aside some time for your wife Kay or for yourself, it can be lost very quickly, and you don't get it back, and because the next thing happens. I don't think you're weird about the funeral thing. I feel that way too. That's one of those times when, as a clergy person, I absolutely want to be there.
Yes.
Because that's that time
Yep.
when someone's moving into eternity, or the family is remembering their loved one's life and all kinds of stuff. I think that's one of those times when clergy have the opportunity to really do some very positive, good work. Now, you retired from full-time ministry. You've been a visitation pastor. I know you're an avid reader. You're an early morning riser. Mm-hmm. You like to go to the gym. You enjoy walking, because we've talked about sometimes when you've seen deer out on your walks and things like that. So just from my information, because everybody wants to know, what does a retired pastor do?
One of the things I enjoy about being fully retired is not having church meetings.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you.
That's one of those. That's very top of the list. And also just having the freedom, not having to be somewhere at a certain time.
You can go to lunch when you feel like it.
I can go to lunch when I want to, and things like that. That's a joy. Now, I'm not saying that I'm not willing to do so. I'm willing to help out. Mm-hmm. In fact, I saw George Patterson a couple of weeks ago at Panera Bread.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was talking to him, and he was interested if I was going to do anything. I said, well, sure. I said, I'm willing to help out. If some of my pastors calls me and says, can you help out do this? I'm ready to do that if my schedule permits, or that kind of thing. Yeah. But it's the full-time thing that I don't have now, and that I enjoy so much.
One of the things that we talk about meetings, and meetings can be a great thing,
yes,
or they can be very difficult. But what they do is and they're important, and we're not criticizing them.
That's right, they are important.
They are valuable to the mission and focus of the church. But when you have all these different organizations that want their pastor there, you can have meeting after meeting after meeting every night of the week.
Yes.
And you have to decide which ones are important, and then you have to have a good people to help you get through them. I understand what you're saying. And you like to cruise too. I know you like to cruise. You and Kay?
Well, we did, but after COVID, that's sort of a thing of the past now.
Okay, so no more cruises in the future, maybe, or?
I don't think so.
Okay, all right.
We're trying to figure out some other things. Well, see, I've gotten older.
I understand.
So, and you're limited on some of the things you can do. And right now, we're waiting because Kay needs knee replacement.
Okay.
She's about doing that probably in the new year. So
okay.
So we can't do anything for her until she gets.
Where did you meet? Where did you and Kay meet?
Concord Church.
Okay.
Outside of Stamford, Delaware.
Not far from Hardscrabble Road.
That's right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That was her home church.
Okay.
And I was invited. They had a Sunday evening service. Mm-hmm. And I was invited there to sing for that service.
Okay.
I also did solo work. And I went there that night, and after the service, a member of the church said, I want you to meet somebody.
Ah.
And he was being a matchmaker, literally.
Yeah.
He really was. And he introduced me to Kay. And that's when it started.
You've been married how many years?
55 tomorrow.
Tomorrow. And just so everybody knows that today is the 8th of June, and today is Bob's 81st birthday. So happy birthday.
Thank you.
And tomorrow is the anniversary.
I made a mistake. Friday is my anniversary.
We'll probably
Friday.
We won't let Casey do this. But no, that's all right. So
Friday's
I think
anniversary.
it's pretty smart, Bob, how you arranged the birthday and the anniversary in the same week.
That was pure coincidence.
Oh my! You're a smart man, Bob. You really are. Now, a couple things. I'm just looking at your sheet here. I've noticed that you talk about some of the places that you've traveled: Greece, England, Scotland, Wales, the Holy Land. Which of these trips that you took was the most influential?
Most influential, if I interpret your question,
Okay.
would be the Holy Land, of course.
All right.
And all the things that took place and being where Jesus walked and, all of that involved.
And what was the most fun?
The most fun was London.
Okay. Why was that the most fun?
Kay and I decided after we had done the England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales trip, and we were in London briefly, we didn't have enough time. So anyway, a year or so later, we simply, with the travel agent's help a little bit, but not much, went to London for a full week. Well, all the travel agent did was make the airline reservations and the hotel where we were stayed. That was close to the tube, and we got a week's pass. And we simply rode that tube all over the place. Went to St. Paul's Cathedral, I don't know how many different times we went in there, and Westminster Abbey, and all that kind of stuff. It was just great. No schedule.
So you're sitting in a room with two people who lived in London,
I know that.
and they're
I
like
remember
it's
that.
like this, like the experts. I feel a little lost.
Well, yeah.
I'm the only person who hasn't been, so now I'll have to go, and you can fill in for me.
I'd be happy to do that.
I knew you would, buddy.
But it was great. I really loved that week.
So, Bob, I want to ask you a couple questions as we move towards the end of our podcast. And Teddy, it may have to be that we do this for two. I don't know what our time is. Because Bob's always a pleasure to talk to. He really is. As you look ahead in your life and in the life of our church, and we know that, things are happening in the world, what do you see as the hope that you have for the future?
It's not a simplistic answer, but the answer that comes to mind is my hope is always in God and His Son, Jesus Christ. And like everybody else, I get so frustrated watching the news and all that's going on. It's so hard to find good news. And finally, I have to tell myself, Bob, you got to stop watching so much news and focus more on that God's still in control, even though it's hard to see. I still believe that God's in control. And whatever happens, like for our own church, there's bound to be some kind of separation. But I'm sure, again, God was going to be there and lead us through that whole process.
One of the fascinating things for me is the Old Testament book of Esther. Because the name of God, the word, that doesn't appear anywhere in that book, but God is certainly behind the scenes working it out. And I see that happening today. As we look at the news and we talk about mass shootings, we talk about, violence towards one another in our conversation, the screaming and hollering that takes place in politics, which is just so unnecessary. I see God working through, I see those glimmers of light and hope. They're not always big, but they're present. And I celebrate those. But I've gotten to the place I'll watch one news broadcast. Often it's a local one because I'm nosy and I want to know what everybody's doing.
Right.
And things. But I don't overdo it.
Yes.
I do check the obituaries to make sure I'm not there. And I read the comics and I read sports to see what the Orioles did. But I think sometimes our focus can get off of God and be onto the problem. And we're focused on the problem grows. When we focus on God, God grows. And I think it's wise advice, friend, to anybody. Do you have any big plans that we need to know about? Are you anything happening that is exciting in Bob's life?
Wow, no big plans.
No big plans.
No
Okay.
big plans. I'm
So-
still going to hopefully be involved in this church as long as I possibly can.
We want you to be.
That kind of thing. But no big, as far as travel plans or whatever, family plans. No, our family is pretty much set. With our daughter has 2 children and our son has 1. So
And I know that you're deeply connected to them.
Very
You
much
and
so.
Kay are investing in their lives and
Yes.
things. So, Bob, I want to say something to you as a friend, and then we'll move towards closing, and you can tell us how you'd like to close it, maybe close in prayer even. I will say to you that Bob Harris has been one of the best pastors in our conference. He is absolutely professional and collegial. He is always well prepared. He always has, just that ability to speak the right word at the right time. We often thank our veterans for their service, but since you and I are in the same profession, Bob, thank you for your wonderful service as
My
a
pleasure.
pastor
Thank you.
in this conference, your friendship, your support on Sunday mornings and through the week. Even though you're not actively in the office, man, we're excited when you come by. And I will tell you too that Bob is a tremendous baker. We don't have the wonderful cakes that we had when Bob was on staff, but he's just a talented, capable, wonderful man. It's a pleasure to have you as a part of this church, you and Kay, and I wish you God's very, very best and God's blessing and all that you do, continued health and well-being. And Bob, I'm going to let you close this in any way you'd like, whether it's a statement, a prayer, whatever you'd like to do. And thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
It's greatly appreciated.
I sometimes think Dale's talking about somebody else
No.
when he says all these things. I really do. It's very, very humbling. But as I look back on my life, I can honestly say I can see how God has worked. God and I had a little quiet time this morning. I woke up and I realized I was 81 today. And I looked back and I could see God's presence in my life. And I wonder where I would be without God's presence. We started, I talked about how poor I was, my family. I'm in awe that I have traveled to all 50 states, that I've been abroad these few times, I've been on cruises, and not because I deserve it, but somehow God has worked all this stuff out.
We're incredibly blessed, aren't we?
And I am absolutely. And I was thinking about trying to pray now this difficult time. How do you pray for Ukraine? Now, every morning, I try to pray, God, may your will be done in Ukraine as your will is done in heaven. Because I don't know what the details are. And I don't know what the future of Ukraine is, but I'm hoping that God's going to be there and there will be a Ukraine after all this stuff is over. I would like to close with prayer, if that's okay? Okay. God's always good to know we're in your presence and to recognize your presence. Thank you for this beautiful day, and thank you for this time talking about my ministry and my history as I've tried to walk with you. And my prayer is, may I continue to try to walk with you. In Christ's name, amen.
Bob, as we close, there's a Presbyterian clergywoman by the name of Ruth Duck. And she has written many prayers and liturgies, and we have some of those prayers in our book of worship. My very favorite prayer reflects something you were talking about. Ruth writes in her prayer, God, we thank you for the unseen movement of your hand in our lives. Thank you, buddy. Blessings to you.